Hello everybody. Welcome Team Phoenix to our social sales engineer live stream. We're still branded with Stand with Ukraine. Please end this horror for the sake of all of us. Please. Today with me is Dola Akinduro. She joins me from Hamburg, right?
Yes, Hamburg.
I'm very excited to have you here. And we will talk about coachability of sales engineers, right? And you in the preparation of the call, you told me something very exciting about the 10 commandments. And this is what I would love to talk with you about. But first of all, please tell us about you.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick. And thank you so much for having me on the show. My name is Dola Akinduro. I am a pre-sales manager at Hubspot. So I lead a fantastic team of solutions engineers at Hubspot. I've been in tech for over 10 years now. The majority of the time I've spent in sales and pre-sales roles. As you said already correctly earlier, I am based in Hamburg, Germany, but I am from Copenhagen, Denmark. So that is home.
Nice.
And I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. You have something very interesting on your LinkedIn profile. There is, I don't know if you know it from your mind, but you say, first, I'm a mother.
Yes, I am.
I'm double WOC in tech. So woman of color, I think that's what it means, right?
Yeah.
And you're a leader. And you say something very interesting. You say, the order matters. Tell me more.
Just like you to call me out on that one, Patrick. So the reason why I put it like that is I'm a mother, and I'm a mother first. So being a mother is what drives me. It is what motivates me. And without that, nothing else matters. So that is my priority number one. Then I'm a woman of color in tech. This is something, from a career perspective, that has defined me. Being a female person of color in the tech industry in Northern Europe brings with it its challenges, right? And its lessons. And I think that has driven the way that I think, the way that I function, and last but not least, of course, the way that I lead. So last point on that list was I'm a leader, right? I have spent the last number of years leading teams and individuals. I love it. But all of that, of course, boils down to me being a mother first, the experiences that I've gained as being a woman of color in tech, and last but not least, leading people in teams.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. And I love the background story of, because everything influences the next, right? Every level influences the next. So how you lead is actually, inspired by your life. That's great. Hopefully we have more in the chat. So Alvaro, hi. Nice to have you on the chat. Give us your questions. Ask Dola. Use the opportunity to actually have this live chat with us. It's going to be really interesting. Let's start with that. So in the preparation, right, we talked a bit. You spoke about implementing change in pre-sales organizations. Can you elaborate a bit about that? So especially around your role at Hubspot as a pre-sales manager, how does change affect you? Or is it a challenge, or is it something you want? What's your point of view?
I think change is inevitable, right? Especially if you're working in tech, and especially if you're working in pre-sales, you have to be really adaptable. You have to be susceptible to change. What I always tell my colleagues and my employees is that they need to be ready for change, right? They need to be able to foresee the change before it hits, so that they are also in charge of their reactions. So I think change is a huge part of my day-to-day, and it has been since the very beginning of my career. And to go a level deeper, I think change has been a huge part, not just of my career, but of my life. So I would probably deem myself someone who's quite adaptable and quite susceptible to change. And I love it because I think it's also part of that is where you grow, right? I think part of that, and it does tend to throw you a little bit out on a spiral, and you could be a little bit uncomfortable at situations, but really learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable, I think, is paramount. And yeah, I think it's also really, it fosters growth, basically.
Yes. All right. From a human psychology standpoint, right? This you're a bit alone there, right? If you look at research, right? We don't love change. By the way, hi Jörg. That's why I have you here. Nice to see you on the stream. Can you see the comments too, Dola?
It's really small right now because we had a little bit of a technical issue there, right? So I'm sort of joining from my phone and I barely see you. So I see that there are some comments popping up, but I wouldn't be able to read it. So if you could help me out with that, that would be fantastic.
So your Carsten is actually greeting us, you most likely.
Hey, Jörg.
And then there's Alvaro with a question. How did your promotion to manager come? I'm trying to become manager instead of lead, but have no luck.
So my specific promotion to management came in that I was asked to step in and take on a role. And that was in the company that I was at previously. So prior to Hubspot, I was asked to step in and take on a role. And part of that role was managing people. So I would say I was probably quite lucky in that, you know, the role came first and I needed then that manager flag, as we called it, or that manager training in order to take on that responsibility. So, but I would also say that it didn't really happen by accident because I, up until that point, had worked a lot and my direction was going in that direction because as I said earlier, I enjoy working with people. I enjoy figuring out what motivates people and helping people achieve their goals. So that's something that really drives me. So everything that I had done up to that point, obviously, pointed in that direction, and I was basically sitting and waiting for the opportunity to be able to step in. So, and to the other point there, you know, I know how it feels to be in a situation where you're ready for that next step and the opportunity doesn't present itself. What I would say there is, you know, it's important to be patient, but also know when to quit. I mean that, and I don't mean that as direct as it sounds, but I mean, if you feel like you're ready for a leadership position and you've been waiting in role for 2, 3, 4 years and you don't have any outlook on when that's going to happen, if that's really where your passion lies and you know that's where you will bring incremental value, I think it's time for you to evaluate whether or not you're in the right place to take that next step. Right. And I think it's up to the individual and every situation is different. Right. But I think that's definitely what I would say to that.
Yeah. And Dola, Alvaro was not asking that, but where do you see the difference between a manager and a lead? So is this something you play out at Hubspot too? I know from other organizations there's a lead and then there's a manager. But, any experiences with that?
From my perspective, manager is just a title. Being a leader is the role. Being a leader is the job. So we should all be leaders. But the question is, do you want that manager title to go with that? That's also fair enough. And some of us do, some of us don't. But we can all be leaders in the roles that we are in, that we have.
Yeah, I see it often used in a way like a team lead, and this is actually someone who works in the field, right? Still, but acts a bit as a manager, like not formally, but in terms of coaching maybe, or giving advice, things like that.
Mm.
So there's Bartholomew who's, hey, nice to meet you. Alvaro, it's an answer to Alvaro. I can recommend getting leadership skills beyond work. For example, organizing people for a good cause, for environment, and later on apply on this job with the experience. That's amazing advice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is really, really fantastic advice, right? So but back to the point there on leadership being the role and manager being the job, you can always work on your leadership skills, right? So you need to really take a hard look at what have you done to prepare yourself for a job as a manager, and to work on your leadership skills so that when that manager job role does open up, you're ready to step in. And there are a bunch of different things that you can do both in role and also outside of your company to prepare you for that. So that's excellent advice.
Yeah, agreed, absolutely. And Alvaro is responding again. I think I would need some coach on this topic. Yeah. Can this help?
Coaching? Absolutely. I'm a big fan of coaching. So the only thing that I would say about coaching is you need to be very specific about what is it that you want to get out of it. And also I think a lot of people, and forgive me if it's not relevant in this case, but I think a lot of people tend to use mentoring and coaching interchangeably. So going into that, if it is coaching that you want or that you believe you need, just being very deliberate and very having a good understanding of what that actually means, and make sure that that's really what you think you want. Or are you talking about mentoring, or are you actually asking somebody what to do? So what is it that you want to get out of it, basically, is what I'm getting at. But I'm a huge fan of coaching, and I think everybody should aspire to be coached.
Yeah. Let's make this concrete. Like one of your people maybe, right? Let's say they complain, like the account executives pulling them last minute into a demo every week, right? So and now you could say, right, how would you coach them to solve this, and how would you mentor them? So is there a difference? Can we make it this concrete? Would this work?
So you're saying a situation where someone is being pulled into deals by the account executives?
Yes.
And they don't want to be pulled in by the account executives?
They want to manage the situation in a better way, maybe with more control, right?
Okay. Yeah, this is absolutely something that you can be coached on. It's also something that you could be mentored on. I think it's just too many ways to Rome, essentially. I think it really depends on what you want to get out of it. I personally am a huge fan of coaching, because I think in coaching, you get to empower an individual to essentially find solutions for their own problems. And I think that's a huge part of growth as well, that you can be part of setting your own path and solving your own problems.
And if I'm now, maybe I'm this, if you're open to such a short role play, like I really want to understand the difference between coaching and mentoring. So I'm this person now, and I say, Dola, I have this huge issue with the account executive. Please coach me. How do I solve it? What would you do?
So in coaching, I think I would start out by having you become be very specific about what your issue is. So really zeroing in on what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve, and why is it a problem? And not just why is it a problem, but why is it a problem right now, right? So I think that's probably the entrance that I would take, to have you sound it out as well, and have you just reflect on what is it that's actually the issue. And also think about what would happen if you didn't do anything. So if you did nothing, what would happen? So as soon as you have like a goal that is specific, and a goal that's measurable, and a goal that's time boxed, then we can start talking about what resources do you have at your disposal to solve this issue, or to achieve this, well, not solve an issue, but more to achieve a goal. And how would you use those resources to your benefit towards achieving that?
Mm-hmm. So essentially, you would ask questions and help me solve my issue from inside.
Yes.
And what if I ask you, please mentor me? What would be the difference?
So I think mentorship is a more longer term. It's not as specific as like coaching. So coaching is, you have, as I said, something really specific, time boxed and measurable. Mentoring can take many shapes, but oftentimes it's a more long-term relationship, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to have like an end, mentor me to achieve this. It's more of also an empowerment strategy, or an empowerment approach, but with no necessary end goal in mind. So if I were to mentor you on this, I might not be super into the details around why is this an issue right now, and what is it specifically you want to solve, so that you can tick in the box, but more talk to you about what is it that drives the behavior that makes you uncomfortable, and how can you work on that in order to also in the future situations, future similar scenarios, would be able to manage situations better.
Yeah. Would it include that you are more specific with your own knowledge in advising me, or?
I think in coaching, absolutely not. So the big part of coaching is exactly that you don't give the coachee the answer, so they need to sort of get to the answer themselves. I think in mentoring, there could be elements of at least inspiring you in a specific direction, and you could sort of share that, like your own experiences and how you perhaps have overcome similar situations. But again, it's not targeted to a specific like end goal. It's just in general talking about a behavioral issue maybe, or something that makes you uncomfortable, and that you can share about your own experiences as a mentor.
Yeah. All right. Do you know Cobra Kai?
I do not.
Netflix series. Okay, then I'll forget the question. I just had a but doesn't matter. Let me go through the chat because there's some activity. There's Kajuri. Also recognize that the best SE does not make best manager leader. Okay, except that you will need to learn new skills in a role where you are responsible for team's success. I think that's a big one, right? Like promoting the best field SE, you have to become manager, right? Because you will be a good one. What's the policy?
I think this person, I didn't get the name. What was the name of the person?
Kajuri.
Kajuri. Okay, yeah, Kajuri. I always like to address people by name. So Kajuri, you make a really good point there. I think it's spot on. What we tend to do is we have, super SEs, and because they're doing so great, the next step is obviously to promote them and become managers. But being a really, really good SE does not necessarily mean that you're going to be a good manager. And that's also, I think, ties back to my point earlier on leadership, that you can be a leader on a number of different levels, and it doesn't necessarily have to go hand in hand with the role of a manager, the job role of a manager. So you can have a role model in a super SE, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this person should be a team manager or a team lead.
Yeah. There are more answers, but I have a question on that too. What do you think about player coaches? So what I mean with that is you promote an SE to be a manager, but say you are so good, you also stay in the role. Like you manage and you play in the field. Do you think that's a good idea? The player coach model?
So player coach, you mean someone who's both an IC and a manager? Is that?
Exactly, yes.
That's not uncommon. In my previous role, I was both an IC and a manager, and I think there are definitely pros and cons to that model. In my current role, I no longer do IC work, and I'm focused on people development. I think it really depends on the constellation of the organization, and what in general like the organization strategy looks like. But both absolutely work. Depends on what you want to achieve. One thing that I will say in terms of a con of that model is at times you need to also figure out how do you prioritize your time, and from there you'll definitely need some support from an organization perspective as well to make it, in quotation marks, okay for you to take a chunk of your time out and focus on people development, because people development, as we can see, is a full-time job on its own, right? So being really clear on the expectations to managers and leadership, and making sure that by having our managers do IC work, we're not sacrificing the quality of team motivation and team development.
Yeah. I think that's the big point of it. So once you see that you can't like lead your people or manage, coach them, right? You don't have time to spend with them. You need to change this model a bit, right? There's an answer from York to Kajuri also. Correct. Complete other or different roles. Like it's the leader in the SE, right? SE side has to manage the deal complexity, support, sales, etc. And leader, manager, has to manage, support, take care of the team members. Complete other role. In total, another background or learning and mindset is needed. Yeah, I agree. And there's I think the conflict in the player coach model. You're always in conflict, right? Do I spend time for me and my quota, or from my team to increase their quota, right? In some sense. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point, right? How do we load balance the priorities for the managers? But from a pro perspective, I will say though that there are obviously also benefits to having a manager who's working the floor as well, because on that level you will be privy to what your SEs are actually going through on a day-to-day basis, right? So you know the job intrinsically and you know the job intimately. And while you can promote someone who does have pre-sales experience and has worked in pre-sales for a while, we also know that especially in tech, it's a quite fast-paced, ever-changing environment. So your knowledge of what it means to be an IC is quickly outdated. So I think that benefit is definitely also part. I mean, being what did you call it? Player coach. Being in a player coach scenario definitely has its perks as well.
Yeah. All right, let's go further. There's feedback for you, Kajuri. Dola, I love the focus on empowering, in quotes, the individual. It emphasizes that you are guiding them to get to the answers themselves. Yeah. I think that's a big...
Thank you, Kajuri. Yes, absolutely. Empowerment is a big part of the way that I lead my team. It's the way that I prefer to be led. And I think we get a whole lot more out of individuals when we really empower them to what do you call it? Help to self-help, basically.
Yeah, help to self. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a psychological trait, right? So when we are in control of the situation, we are much more on fire. We are inspired, right? And that's the thing. When your way of coaching actually gives me the idea myself. Okay, I should call the account executive maybe proactively. Maybe that will help me like getting this under control, right? So it was my idea, and you didn't tell me how to do it, right? And that's so powerful and self-empowering. I love this. Yeah, yes, exactly. Cobra Kai was about Karate Kid, and maybe I spoiled what I thought is when you watch Karate Kid or Cobra Kai, there are different styles of learning karate, and I thought one is coaching, and namely the one of Mr. Miyagi, right? When you when you wash your car and stuff like that, and yeah, Daniel's son doesn't know what he does there, right? Until the moment when he sees, oh, I can do karate. It's like, yeah, that's what I thought of. That's my ask. So, Alvaro, sorry, I still have a cough. Alvaro, I think companies are looking for people having the manager role in their CV. Okay, if you have not official role, you're disqualified. Okay, is this a hiring thing? Maybe is HR that like traditional?
Yes and no. I think it's a difficult one, Alvaro. I think there are, to be honest, I think there are very few companies that will take a chance on a first-time manager with no people leadership experience. That being said, back to the point that we had earlier, there are a bunch of things that you can do to practice leadership and to get leadership experience, which then essentially means you're bringing transferable skills to the job interview. And those things are not, or at least they should not be neglected. So I think it really depends on the company. Of course, it depends on the role. And yeah, it can be difficult for an entry-level manager to get your first management role, but it's absolutely not impossible. I think you need to look at what have you done aside from just the functional management role in itself. What leadership experience do you have under your belt? And I believe, Alvaro, you were the one who had also said that you have a lot of team lead experience, for example. So I think that's something that I would typically, as an employee or an employee candidate, lean into, because I know as a hiring manager, that's absolutely something that I would value.
And do you also hire managers?
So no, I do not manage managers, but I do the interviews with managers, if that makes sense.
Okay, so
yes.
the peer interviews or okay. What is it you're looking for in a manager?
What am I looking for in a manager?
Yeah, or what convinces you to say, yes, this girl is the next manager over there?
I think it's a difficult one. That's a loaded question, Patrick, because it really depends. And I don't want to. I don't want to get into like specifics, because I think it's really, really difficult. It depends on the candidate, and at the end of the day, I will also be very clear that the end decision does not lie with me as to whether or not a manager gets hired, but I can tell you what will make me give my recommendation. And part of that is, and almost at the top of the list, is culture. So what I would always be looking for is someone who brings, not only like fits into our culture as a team, as a leadership team, but someone who brings something additional. So I would be looking for not just culture fit, but culture add. And then, of course, experience comes into play. And that's where, I would be leaning into how much experience do you have in the field? Because don't forget, as a manager, your primary responsibility is to coach individual contributors to being successful. So I'm going to want to look at what do you have under your belt that basically qualifies you to do that. And thirdly, what I also really, hone in on is your management style. So that, back to Alvaro's point on, if you're a first time manager, I think a lot of people feel like, if you don't have that manager title, you don't necessarily know what it means to be a manager. But I actually think it has to happen the other way around. So you need to be very clear on, or at least have an idea of what your personal management style is. And that's what you can gain by getting getting a lot of different leadership experience before you go for your first manager role. So like management style is definitely one thing that I will hone in on. And as a little side note, I am really, really, I don't know if you've noticed this, Patrick, but I'm really, really big on diversity. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is top of my list. So something that can really get me excited about a potential manager candidate is someone who has taken the time to understand that and can articulate the importance of that. I think that's definitely a plus and a win in my book.
Yeah, nice list. I like it. So those were 4 points. When you listen carefully, you could actually like make checks behind, right? So where do I stand? Where do I need help? Amazing. And Alvaro was asking more. Dola, any advice coaching old style sales engineers to start working in a sales team, also in quotes, as salespeople instead of keeping comfortable as demo dollies? Question. Is the question clear?
So Alvaro is asking, first and foremost, a little clarity on what you mean by old style sales engineers.
I think, at least I have a feeling what he refers to. It's this like pre-sales being seen as a resource instead of a valuable team of the sales or account team, right? So a valuable member of the account team. So sitting in the deal reviews, account planning, stuff like that, instead of just being called up and say, hey, tomorrow is the demo, right? Please join.
Okay.
So how do I get those people who want this old style? Like, call me. I'm your hero and I will demo for you. And instead get them into a more salesy motion, like being interested in the client, planning the deal and stuff like that.
So that's a loaded question because I can't from that really decipher the situation. And I think from my perspective, it could be one of two things. Either the challenge or the issue lies with the individual, or the challenge or issue lies with the organization. And I'm tending to lean into the latter, but I'm not really sure. So I think I would give an answer from both perspectives. So if the challenge lies with the individual, I think, and the organization is fine. I think this is where, as a leader or as a manager, you would really want to scratch the surface a little bit on what are the drivers and motivators for this individual and why they are so set in their ways, even as the organization so clearly has moved on. And a good tool for that, which I think everybody should use, irrespective of whether you're a sales engineer or not, and you're thinking about making a change, is there's this diagram where you basically map out what gives you energy on your day-to-day and what drains your energy on a day-to-day. And using that, I think, is a very good tool to try and figure out, are you in the right place and are you in the right job? And
do you have a name for that so that we can Google it and find it?
110% there is a name for that, but I can't think of it right now. Maybe someone in the chat can help me out.
Yeah, maybe someone finds
maybe if you just Google like what drains your energy versus what gives you energy model, it might pop up. But it's quite useful. So I think from that perspective, that's what I would start honing in on, to just understand what this person's motivations are and motivators are, and see if there's anything that we can do as an organization to support. If the problem, on the other hand, lies with the organization in that you don't have, and this happens very often, right? You don't have that backing. So in pre-sales, right, it can be really difficult if you don't have, one, the backing of the sales organization, and two, you don't have a strong pre-sales leadership and a strong pre-sales culture backing your job and your significance. It can be really, really difficult because it can feel a little bit like punching walls, right? And sad to say, I don't have any like great ideas how you can, as an individual, influence that, except raising the problem and trying to see what you can do, at least in your own little silos, almost like in your own little day-to-day. But it can be very, very difficult if you don't have the backing of the organization.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Alvaro, let us know. I thought that for amazing answers. Then there's Kyle. Kyle, good to see you. My old friend. He's asking, should mentoring have KPIs and compensation impact? Oh, interesting.
I am going to say I haven't seen that model before work, so my immediate go-to is no, and I'll tell you why. I think mentoring is something that you need to do on your own time. It needs to be an investment, and it needs to be something that you are dedicated to. And I think at some point when you start tying KPIs and compensation to that, what you risk doing is you risk pushing a lot of people who have no business mentoring into mentorship positions. And that has potential, as you can imagine, can have potentially really bad consequences for the outcome, right? But please, if you have a model in which that has worked, I am also more than open to be educated on that.
This leads me to a question, like, actually it's two questions. Can everybody be a mentor? Because this is often seen in an organization, right? Reverse mentoring, the mentee becomes the mentor, and so on throughout the organization across models. So can everybody be a mentor, and can everybody be a coach?
Mm-hmm. Short answer is yes. In my opinion, yes. I think everybody can be a mentor. But that's not the same thing as saying everybody should be that like mentoring is universal. So I think the one of the most important things about mentorship is the relationship, or like I want to say like the wavelengths. You need to make sure that you're on the same wavelength as your mentee, or at least like you have a common understanding. So having that relationship, I think, is important between mentors and mentees, because as I said earlier, in my opinion, at least, mentorship is something that can go on for quite some time. So you build the trust needs to be there, right? You build a trusting relationship over time to have someone also feel comfortable being vulnerable with you, and vice versa, right? So I think everyone can be a mentor, but it doesn't mean that everybody should be a mentor to everyone, right? So I think it's really about finding that balance.
Yeah. And from the coach perspective, I think I did a LinkedIn poll half a year ago, maybe, and asked if a coach, like a pre-sales coach or a sales coach, must have been a championship player, right? Or if you can be a coach even though you were a standard player in the game. What do you think?
So being a coach, I think, takes a little bit more. I think you need to be really aware, and it's hard, right? Because there's some specific rules around coaching that you need to respect, I almost want to say. So you need to, just as an example, not giving people the answer, but really helping them reach that answer. That's really tough. Like it's hard work. So I would say, like, everybody can be a coach, yes, but I would always recommend that you have some element of coaching training to help you be an effective coach and help your coachee reach their full potential and get the most out of the coaching sessions.
Yeah, but it's a requirement for every manager out there, right? So coaching is part of your job, especially in sales and sales engineering, right? So
it should be.
Should be. I think it is in some way implicitly required, right? Is there an advice where you say this is a great coaching model that's approachable, that's great to learn and to apply? What's your experience?
Well, everyone can go ahead and Google the GROW, GROW model, and it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go into the details of it here, but that's essentially the approach that we use at Hubspot. It's the coaching approach that I am currently being trained in, and I think that's it's quite simple to use.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. There's Pooja asking, hello, any advice for a new pre-sales lead, so presumably she is, to remember for their career growth?
Advice. First and foremost, be yourself, be authentic, because cliche as it sounds, everyone else is taken. But I think also specifically when you're now in a role where people lean on you to succeed, it's really, really important that you're grounded in your own values. So first and foremost, be authentic. And I think that can be really, really difficult, especially as a female in tech or a female in leadership positions, where you're potentially one of the only ones in the room, or first movers in certain aspects. You do risk feeling a pressure to conform. But my advice to you would be to find your own style and find your own ground, and stick to that, because it got you where you are.
Yeah. What's tough with this? Like, can you be more specific? So what are the things that challenge you in this situation? Can be from your life, if you want to share some stories or something. That's really interesting, how you would handle this, or how you handled to get to the position where you are, because you're really successful, right?
I wouldn't say I'm really, really successful, but thank you. I think
you are.
I think what makes it difficult is you're leading, but you're leading in someone else's organization, if that makes sense. So, there's a whole organization built, a whole precedent set, a culture around what the playing field that in which you need to operate. And it's, of course, a challenge, because there will have been people or managers before you who have done things in a specific way, and have set a precedence for better or worse. So coming in from the sidelines and coming into that, it can be quite difficult, because you bring your own learnings, you bring your own story, your own background, but at the same time, there will be this pressure to conform to the way things are done in the organization that you're in. And I think that's probably why it's a little bit difficult. It can be challenging, but also why it is really, really important, because you have been brought into that position for a reason, and it wasn't to do what the previous person did or all your other colleagues are doing. You're brought into that position because you have a unique contribution that people want to see, right? So trust in that.
Yeah. It might be a stupid follow-up, or maybe even provocative, I don't know. But I want to ask you, so what you explained now is true for everyone who joins, right? What would be specific that you say you especially had issues with that? Is that the gap is wider, or is there lacking respect, or what do you think?
I don't think it's anything like that. I think it doesn't even necessarily come from a bad place. I think it just comes from a place of not knowing. So if you want, I can see that you really want me to use myself as an example, so I will. Yes, my own personal example is that I'm coming from a place, and in every position that I've been in, I've been the first woman of color. In almost every room that I've been in, every team that I've been in, I've been the only woman of color. That's luckily no longer the case, which is part of why I absolutely love being at Hubspot. But that shapes you, right? And that also means that there is no precedent set for someone like you, someone with your background, but there's a whole lot of precedents and a whole backstory built around people who don't look like me, or who don't necessarily think like me, right? So I think that's probably what has been the biggest, the biggest. I'm loath to call it a challenge, because I don't think it's necessarily a challenge. I just think it's something that I've had to be really aware of, and I've had to find my own voice, and I've had to find my own identity. And for some people, it might be easy. For me, it was not. But I'm also intrinsically quite a people pleaser. So I always try to adapt, and I want everyone to be comfortable around me. And that means that at some point you might end up losing yourself and your own values because you're too busy being what you think everybody else expects you to be. So that's why my advice is what it is. But to each his own, or his or her own. I think everyone has their own hills to climb.
Yeah, great answer. And by the way, I feel very comfortable with you, and I think you stay authentic.
Very good. I aim to please, Patrick.
Let's see. There's a lot more stuff from the chat. Let's go through that. So Jörg has a long answer. Let's see. To Alvaro, I think. I think this depends, he says. Are you coming from the outside of the organization? And if you are not a homegrown plant, then yes. Recruiters and the stakeholders would watch on this, I guess. That's about the experience in management, right? If you come from their own farmland, so nice metaphors, thoroughly grown and prospered, it always is a good call to take them in consideration for leadership. Like they know the tricks and tips within the org. Yeah? They know how the ball is running already, and you only, in quotes, have to support them to a great cool manager. Yeah, I think the point, what the org makes is it depends on where you come from, right? From the inside, it should be like easier because you know the game, right? In that sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Absolutely, because you're basically that organization's baby, right? So they've bred you, they've shaped you, they've nurtured you. So you would hope that the organization, the next step is, of course, to help you reach your career aspirations, but be careful with that as well. It really depends, again, on the organization and where they are in their growth journey, because it could be that some organizations, especially ones that are scaling or looking to change or make a shift in their approach or strategy, that they deliberately would then target outsiders with management experience from other companies or from outside the organization to bring in some of that new knowledge and bring in some of that new approach, right? So I think it really depends, but if you're patient enough and your organization is good, there should always be room eventually for you to grow into the position that you can be most impactful in.
Yeah, great answer. And Alvaro also says, Dola, thanks so much. The question is answered. So
thank you for your question, Alvaro.
Yeah, we made somebody happy. That's great. Well, you. So there's more from Kyle. Before, and I want to go through the 10 commandments. I'm really excited about this topic too. Kyle asked, in this remote world, any considerations on how coaches set up their physical home office background to create the right coaching atmosphere in virtual meetings? Oh, very interesting question.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm sure you never thought about this before, but this is Kyle. He's like, he's a great creative mind.
That is a really, really good one. And I think all coaches should actually think about this, because I think, especially in a virtual environment, we don't tend to think about how it looks on the other side of the screen. My immediate response to this is absolutely, because I think the most important thing when you're being a coach is that your coachee is comfortable, right? So you want to make sure that you have the prerequisites in place for this person to feel comfortable digging into wherever, whatever goals or challenges, and converting them to goals that they may have. So making your background a little bit more personal, I think, definitely goes a long way. So instead of having these filters at the background, blurry, sit in your couch or have your cat stroll by, or, to make yourself a little bit more approachable. and to make the atmosphere a little bit more comfortable for the coachee, I think absolutely couldn't hurt, right? It's a great question. I never thought about that.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Then there's Bartholomeus again. Dola, what were your strategies for the home office situation during COVID restrictions? How did you manage the colleagues who got sad, lonely, and lost motivation? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Tough one, right?
It is. It is. And thank you very much for this question. Is that Bartholomeus?
Bartholomeus.
Bartholomeus, yeah. Thank you so much for this question. I think everyone, so the COVID restrictions hasn't been easy for anyone, right? But everyone has been struggling at different levels. So some people struggle more than others. What I have been so lucky with is my organization has, by my organization, Hubspot as a company, has a lot of focus on mental health and a lot of focus on psychological well-being. And therefore, there have been like means set in place to support employees that are struggling a little bit. I'll give you an example. Although offices were shut down, they did remain open for hardship cases. So for employees that for some reason or another could not work from home, they would then be welcome to come and work from the office. So just having an organization that puts that in priority, I think, has made it much easier for me as a manager, because these things have been available. Another thing that HubSpot does is, for all HubSpot employees, we offer a benefit called Modern Health, where you can trigger a coach or a mentor or someone to talk to. So if you're struggling and it's someone outside of the organization as well, you can make use of that Modern Health benefit to get the support that you need, right? So there are just a couple of things. What we've also done in our team specifically is to make sure that we have just really good Zoom habits. So everybody has Zoom fatigue at this point. It's real. But nevertheless, just making sure that we have really good Zoom habits when we are on Zoom, having your camera switched on, just, I think, makes it a little bit easier to endure. We also use our Slack channels quite heavily. So saying good morning every morning when you turn on your workstation, going into your group Slack channel and putting good morning in there. All those things that we do as a team have certainly helped as well. And then last but not least, what I will say, I think, as a manager, is I've been always very, and I hope my team wouldn't disagree with that, but I at least try to really hone in on how they're feeling. So always asking them during our one-to-ones, how are they feeling? How are they doing? And really trying to pick up on any red flags early on. And creating a safe space and safe environment for them to share if they're struggling, so that we can find a plan to support them on a case-by-case basis.
Cool. Yeah, amazing insights. Great stuff. So there's Richard also, referring to the last issue, create a background that shows authenticity. Okay.
Yes. That was a much nicer and slicker way of putting what I said. Thank you, Richard.
That's the abstract version. Yeah. Perfect.
Short and sweet. I like it.
Short and sweet, exactly. So, but in our preparation, there was one more thing that spawned my inspiration. I was like, I want to know more about this. And this is, you told me about 10 commandments of sales engineering. And the interesting bit of this was, you said, I think, that the individual contributors actually created those 10 commandments. Tell me more.
That's right. I don't know that this is like super revolutionary, to be honest, but what we did in our organization was we had our team has grown really, really quickly over a lot over a short period of time. And we really wanted to make sure that we documented what pre-sales or solutions engineering best practices look like. Because, when you go from an organization where you have a handful of people who all get it, right? They've been doing the job and they've grown up with the role. Everyone gets it. It becomes more and more apparent the more people you add to that it's what you used to think or take as a given isn't necessarily a given, which is the beauty of diversity, right? That you bring in new people with new ideas and different styles. But what also happens there is you generate a lot of noise, right? So you want to make sure that what are our non-negotiables? What are our best practices? That irrespective of where you're coming from, this is the key to success in this organization. So I got together with a number of solutions engineers on the team, and we talked about it, and something really beautiful came out of that. And that's what we now have as our 10 commandments, which essentially are 10 best practice statements, broken up in 3 buckets. So one is how to be. So very much around you as an individual doing the job as a pre-sales professional. How should you be? The next one is how to grow. So again, looking at it from your perspective, you have a career trajectory ahead of you. What do you need to know in order to grow successfully? And the last one, and certainly not the least, probably one of the most important ones, is how to engage, because we work with a number of stakeholders. Some of our most important stakeholders are sales reps. But how do we effectively engage with sales reps? What are the best practices around engaging with sales reps? So that summarizes, 3 overall categories and 10 best practices statements or commandments. And what I will say is it could be anything, right? So the detail in that really doesn't matter. What matters is that you get together in the organization in which you are currently working and you decide for yourself what are your best practice statements, because it also helps you lean into that when you're in moments of doubt. For new joiners, it's an absolute godsend, right? Because you join a new team and you already know, okay, this is what is expected of me. And as a manager, it also helps, right? Because then I know in what direction can I help coach my team. So the way we use it in my team is during our one-to-ones, everyone has already identified 2 or 3 of these best practice statements that they want to keep working on, where they've identified, this isn't really my strong suit. So we talk about that, right? And we hold each other accountable to making sure that we don't forget about it and that we actually work towards bridging those gaps.
I think it's amazing. So you said how to be, how to grow, and how to engage, right? And those are the buckets that you fill with principles for the team, right?
Yeah.
And they are kind of timeless, universal. So you actually grow as a team alongside. Right?
They're not necessarily timeless, though. I think that's one thing also we need to be very honest about. Nothing is static. So it's important to revisit them as your team evolves and your organization grows, just to see, are they still relevant. But the most important thing in all of that is these are not my 10 commandments, right? These are summarized by solutions engineers, by the team, for the team. So everyone is on board, right? It's not something that's coming top down from management. It is really, what do the SEs feel are the most important attributes for them to be successful in their role?
I like this tool a lot. It spawns like ideas, and I like it. Bartholomeus says, thank you for the answer. Really good that HubSpot has organized support through company policies, as these times bring real challenges and
absolutely.
a heart.
Absolutely.
And there's one last question, chat. I think if you have 2 more minutes, Dola, we can try to answer that. What advice you would give to someone who wants to be a sales engineer but facing entry barrier due to lack of direct sales experience. Got the review that I have a good, deep technical knowledge, but lack of business sales acumen.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Hisham.
Okay. That's a good one. I think it really depends on your organization, because I don't know what offerings are out there, but I can give you what we've done in mind, because there was actually that exact situation. Someone was trying to make a shift internally into solutions engineering, and what she was told was exactly that you need to work a little bit on your business acumen and sales skills. And what I ended up suggesting to her is, one, buddy her up with a sales engineer, so someone who's doing the job. So find yourself a mentor who's doing the job, and ask that person to take you through specific situations or specific use cases and train with you how to respond in them. So I think you can get a long way by mentoring or being a mentee to someone who's doing the job, and who can introduce you to real life examples and real life situations that you can then learn from and practice.
Yeah.
And that person can give you feedback. So that's one thing that you can do. Also, depending on your organization, I'm not sure if you have access to formal sales training, but there is a bunch out there. So if it is something that's possible for you, I would say absolutely try and reach out and see if you can get on one of these like formal sales training and courses. And the most important thing there, I think, is really following the one that your organization uses. So don't go for one if your organization is using the other, because there are minute differences in them. So figure out what sales approach, a sales strategy your organization uses, and try and see if you can get yourself on one of that. And sometimes you might have to build a business case for that. It depends on your organization or how bureaucratic your organization is. But if it's something that you really want, and you see that you can drive incremental value to the business by making that change, I would say it's absolutely worth it to build that case.
Yeah. Great. So just also out of my experience, I get contacted a lot by people who want to join sales engineering. And those whom I discuss them with, the next steps, they always have such a stable of books, right? Just close to them. I read everything from sales engineering. I read every sales, spin selling, right? Challenger sales. I don't know everything. They've read all of this. So if somebody tells you you're missing business or sales acumen, start reading. That's the best mentor you can take without much costs, right? And when you find out what the organization you want to go into, because I assume you want to join an organization, what they use, like Dola said, go deeper there, right? And get this into your head in some way. I think that's
and Patrick, if I may add to that, like in terms of reading, because there's a lot of material out there, my suggestion would be to figure out what are the key industries that your organization is targeting. So where are your key playing fields, and start there. So if you're in automotive, start learning about that. Like what are the priorities? So if you're in tech and automotive, what are the key pain points that are faced in this industry? And just try and build an understanding around that. But always do it from the perspective first of the organization that you want to join. Otherwise, it's just a lot of paperwork.
It is. Okay, let's finish off with Kyle. Kyle, thanks for being here. Rules with expiration dates. Genius, perfect, great discussion. Yeah, thanks for the last words, I would say. Dola, anything you want to say to the community, to the world, before we finish?
Just thank you for everyone for joining. When you told me, Patrick, that this was going to be an hour, I was like, really? People want to listen to me for an hour? That's all right. I can talk for an hour. So thank you all for indulging me, and thank you very much for all the questions. I really enjoyed this, and thank you, Patrick, for setting up this platform for people like us to come and share our stories. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think as I say thank you for all of those who asked the questions. You had great answers and great advice for all of us. So it was Really a pleasure having you. So, and with this, I would say we are greatly over the time, but it was so valuable. Thank you very much. Yeah, ask questions afterwards. So the chat is still open. After you can watch the recording on LinkedIn or YouTube. Follow us on YouTube, like our little Phoenix up here. And yeah, it would be a pleasure to see you next week again. Dola, thank you very much again. Lots of success in your role going forward. And yeah, it was a pleasure seeing you all. Thanks for your questions. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.